Morning light hit the glass, too sharp and too steady. Aaliyah blinked, the glare burning against her eyes. She pushed herself up, her palms sliding against cold, smooth metal that seemed to vibrate under her touch. The room hummed with a low, constant frequency, the sound of advanced machinery working in cycles. She scanned the space. Glowing panels lined the walls, casting soft, sterile light over every surface. There was no dust, there was no wind, just the hum. She shifted her weight, feeling the weight of the silence pressing in from the corners of the room. She reached out to touch the wall, expecting warmth, but found only the biting chill of processed alloy. She took a breath, the air tasting filtered and metallic. She was alone. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, her feet meeting the polished floor with a faint, hollow click. She stood, waiting for a voice, a shadow, or a sign of life, but the facility remained perfectly, hauntingly still. The isolation was not just an absence of people. It was a physical weight, thick and unyielding, pushing against her chest as she stood in the center of the silent, glowing room. Aaliyah stepped out of the infirmary and into a corridor that stretched into darkness. The ceiling arched high above, lost in shadows, and the floor extended like a mirror of polished stone. Her footsteps clicked, sharp and rhythmic, echoing against the distant walls. She walked faster, turning corners that led to more silence and more corridors. Every door she passed remained sealed, unresponsive to her presence. She stopped in the center of a wide atrium. The scale of the facility was massive, carved directly into the mountain, yet it felt abandoned. She closed her eyes, shutting out the sterile, humming lights. She focused on the vibration in the air, pushing her awareness past the stone walls, past the mountain, and out into the void. She reached out, searching for a tether. At first, there was only the cold vacuum of space, then a ripple of static. Then she felt it. A surge of violent energy, flickering and desperate. She caught the faint, jagged rhythm of a fight happening light years away. It was chaotic, sharp, and undeniably familiar. She took a sharp breath, her eyes snapping open, locked onto the direction of the disturbance. The atmosphere shifted. Silence was replaced by the low, rhythmic thrum of a world in collapse. Above, the sky hung heavy, a bruised tapestry of deep red and jagged violet clouds. Emma drifted in the upper currents, her vision tracking the heat signatures below. The ground was a churned expanse of dust and shadow. Thousands of creatures swarmed the plains, their movements erratic and hungry, tearing through the landscape with mindless ferocity. Emma watched, her pulse steadying as the chaotic energy of the conflict reached her. She felt the spike of a familiar, desperate signature, a bright, flickering spark of resistance buried deep within the swarm. It was a beacon of pure intent against a tide of mindless aggression. She did not hesitate. Emma adjusted her trajectory, tucking her frame into a tight, aerodynamic dive. Gravity caught her, pulling her down toward the red-stained earth like a stone dropped into a well. The wind screamed against her ears, rising in pitch as she accelerated. The battlefield expanded, growing from a distant, shifting mass into a brutal, localized nightmare of claws and motion. She aimed for the heart of the swarm, her eyes locked on the fray, ready to break the line. Bly stood at the center of the dust cloud, her feet planted wide to brace against the constant impact of mindless bodies. Her blade left trails of violet light, carving arcs through the air, but the creatures barely slowed. Every swing required more force than the last. She parried a heavy claw, the vibration traveling up her arm and rattling her teeth. She pivoted, slashing through a cluster of shadows, but two more took their place instantly. Her breathing was ragged, a harsh rasp that barely cut through the cacophony of shrieking. The blade flickered, the light stuttered, then faded to a dull, dying pulse. She struck out, but the energy failed to connect with the necessary impact. She stumbled. A creature slammed into her side, forcing her back. She recovered with a desperate lunge, her movements losing their precision, her muscles burning with the strain of holding the line alone. She looked up, but the horizon was gone, replaced by a wall of writhing limbs and jagged teeth. She was losing the rhythm. Each step backward felt heavier than the last. The swarm pressed in, tighter, faster, sensing the opening in her defense. The circle tightened. Bly could smell the rot of the encroaching mass, a thick, metallic stench that burned her nostrils. She shifted her weight, but her boots slipped on the slick, dust-covered ground. Her grip on the hilt of her blade was white-knuckled and trembling. A creature lunged, its claws scraping against her guard, the force of the impact nearly knocking her off balance. She shoved it back, but there was no room to swing. The space around her was shrinking, the walls of writhing forms pressing inward until she could feel the heat radiating from their bodies. She looked up, searching for an escape, but saw only a sky choked with jagged shadows. The creatures fell silent. They stopped their frantic shrieking, standing motionless, their heads tilted in a synchronized, predatory rhythm. It was a calculated, suffocating stillness. Bly raised her blade, her chest heaving, waiting for the final onslaught. She braced her legs, muscles screaming, as a creature nearest to her reared back to deliver the killing blow. Then, a streak of light shattered the red sky. A pink blur plummeted from the clouds, tearing through the air with a sound like tearing metal, aimed directly at the heart of the swarm. The ground buckled as Emma slammed into the center of the mass. A shock wave of pink light erupted, scattering the front line like dry leaves in a gale. Bly surged forward, her purple blade finding its rhythm again in the sudden opening. They collided mid-stride, pressing back to back, a solid anchor amidst the chaos. Emma pivoted, her palms striking a creature and launching it into the air, while Bly swung in a low, sweeping arc that severed the legs of the next wave. They moved as one. When Emma ducked, Bly stepped over her to deliver a crushing blow. When Bly pivoted, Emma mirrored her, guarding her flank with precise, rapid-fire strikes. They were a spinning turbine of pink and violet force. The creatures swarmed back, frantic and unrelenting, but the duo held the center. Emma locked eyes with Bly, her chest rising and falling in perfect tempo with her ally. "Now!" Emma shouted. They reached out, palms facing the horizon, channeling their remaining strength into a single point. A sphere of violet and pink light swelled between them, humming with enough intensity to vibrate the very air. They pushed it forward. The blast tore through the ranks, vaporizing the remaining swarm in a blinding flash of white heat. The ringing in the air faded, leaving behind the sound of heavy, ragged breathing. Ash drifted down like gray snow, coating the scorched earth. Emma stood with her hands on her hips, her pulse slowing, watching Bly. Bly remained rigid, her blade still humming with a dying flicker of light. Emma broke the silence. "How about a thank you?" Bly pulled her arms tight across her chest, her jaw set, and spat out, "I didn't need your help." She stared at the charred remains surrounding them, her gaze refusing to meet Emma's. Emma walked forward, the crunch of cooling debris loud in the quiet, and gestured to the carnage. "You were about to become lunch." Bly looked away, her shoulders dropping, the tension leaving her frame in a long, shaky exhale. Her expression slackened, turning toward the horizon. I am not evil, just a failed soldier. She let her blade deactivate, the purple light vanishing into the hilt. Emma closed the distance, her boots stopping inches from Bly's, and extended a hand, palm open. Bly looked at the hand, then up at Emma, her eyes searching for a hidden trap. Finding none, she sighed, the sound echoing in the stillness, and finally reached out to take it. The truce held, but the air remained heavy. They turned toward the control tower, a jagged silhouette looming against the violet sky. A massive creature, shaped like a dragon, paced the tower perimeter, its scales clicking against the stone. Emma started to move, but her stride faltered. A low, rhythmic thrumming began to vibrate through the soles of her boots. Bly froze, her hand hovering instinctively near her hilt. The sound was not coming from the tower, but from beneath their feet. It was a magnetic, physical tug, pulling at the very marrow of their bones. The ground cracked in a jagged line, leading away from the tower and toward a hidden fissure in the mountainside. The dragon-like beast stopped pacing, its head snapping toward the cave entrance, letting out a low, guttural hiss that rattled the loose gravel. Emma felt the pull intensify, a cold, metallic sensation crawling up her spine. It was not a request, it was a summons. They exchanged a look, the uncertainty replaced by a shared, sharp-edged alertness. They stepped off the path. With every inch they moved toward the dark opening, the air grew thinner, and the thrumming evolved into a steady, pulsing beat that matched the rhythm of their own hearts. The cave entrance swallowed them. Inside, the violet light of the outside world died, replaced by a deep, absolute stillness. The air here was stagnant, cold, and smelled of ozone. They moved deeper, their footsteps muffled by a fine layer of gray dust. In the center of the cavern, a figure floated inches above the stone floor. It was motionless, suspended in a state of suspended animation. Emma reached out to touch a nearby rock formation, but her hand stopped mid-air. The figure's eyes snapped open. They were not eyes, but pools of shifting light that locked onto Emma with terrifying clarity. The figure drifted downward until its feet touched the ground. It did not speak. It moved with a fluid, unnatural grace that made Bly instinctively step back. The figure stopped directly in front of Emma and sank to its knees, bowing its head until it pressed against the cold floor. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until the figure whispered in a voice that sounded like grinding stone, "My Queen of Multiverses, you have returned." Emma recoiled, her back hitting the cave wall. "I am just me," she snapped, her breath hitching in her throat. The figure did not rise, its head remaining bowed in absolute devotion as the truth hung in the air between them. Emma pushed away from the stone wall, her fists clenched. "I am not your queen. I have no throne." The seer remained motionless, ignoring the protest as if it were nothing more than wind. With a slow, deliberate gesture, the figure raised its palms. Between them, space warped and folded. A silver construct began to coalesce, drawing light from the very air of the cave. It solidified into a gauntlet, its surface etched with lines that glowed with a rhythmic, deep blue intensity. The seer held it out, the metal vibrating with a low, harmonic hum. "You forged this in a time before stars," the voice rasped. Emma hesitated, but her hand moved of its own volition. As her fingers brushed the cold, pulsing surface, the blue light flared, crawling up her forearm. A sharp jolt of electricity surged through her nerves. Images shattered into her mind, burning cities, shifting dimensions, and a face she had never seen but somehow recognized. She gasped, the gauntlet locking into place with a heavy, magnetic click. The cave walls seemed to tilt. The weight of the artifact was not just physical. It was an anchor dragging her back into a past she had spent a lifetime forgetting. She looked at the seer, then at her own glowing hand, and for the first time she did not know who she was.